Welcome to the BirthFit Angel. Centrists and right-wing people, this is for you. People that are thinking if you're non-binary and you're not sure, this is for you. And people that are just really bored during quarantine, this is for you. Today, I'm going to talk about the difference between sex and gender. Why I'm doing this video, it was hard for me to find concise videos on this that kind of just explain it and just put it out there. Sex and gender used to be synonymous. They used to mean pretty much exactly the same thing. Now we've split them apart because we need a word that now gender holds. Language is really just a social construct. So since language isn't like an objective thing, we can decide to use another word. If you really don't like using the word gender for this definition, we can use the word zoop. Regardless of whatever word we use, we need a different definition for sex, which is like the physical characteristics, things like genitals, gonads, chromosomes, that sort of thing. You have the sexual characteristics, which are physical, and then you have the more social characteristics, the way that someone wants to identify, the way that someone wants to express, the things that people do generally or enjoy, I guess, in terms of activities. This is why you normally say there are girly things and guyly, manly things. So in our society, these two things, the sex and the gender, are heavily linked, right? They're like, oh yeah, you're supposed to be this, these are supposed to fit together. For some people, they just don't. Some people are just not happy. And in fact, like some people have gender dysphoria, which is like they feel terrible. They don't fit within the gender that's usually linked to their sex. And so what's wrong with going to the other gender, right? They still are their sex technically, even though sex is to a bimodal distribution, but that's a whole other thing. They go from this sex that they started out in, and if they want to identify and express themselves in the other gender, they totally can do that. And a small portion of people, like trans people are only like 1% of the population. This is not a big number of people. And of those people, an even smaller portion of them, quite a smaller portion of them, are non-binary, which is people that don't fit within either of those two genders that are pushed as like the only genders, right? So just to summarize, sex is physical, gender is social. We don't need to, we need the separation because this is actually important for some people, a very small portion of people. So now that we've got that straight, let's get some terms really quick. Male and female refers to sex. Man, woman, or boy and girl refer to gender. Simple. Now, why do people transition? Like, why do people get hormones or surgeries? There's a really simple answer for this. Since society has decided to make sex and gender like fit together in certain ways, like male and man are supposed to be together and woman and female are supposed to be together. Since this is a thing, it's very common for people to be like, okay, well, I want to identify as the other gender. And in order to actually be able to fit in with society, because it is a very social thing, they feel the need to get some surgery to present as that way. Or else they'll feel insecure about who they are, and they won't feel good about themselves because they know, like, if gender is a social thing, they haven't really fully transitioned if they feel that way. Not everyone feels this way. But they haven't fully socially transitioned unless they've changed their certain sexual characteristics as well and kind of moved over in terms of sex in certain ways to present that way. I could bring up like the trans medicalist true scum argument of like, gender dysphoria is a mental illness, and in order to get rid of it, you have to transition. But it's like, that's not a very good way of thinking because that discludes people like non-binary people. And some non-binary people want to transition, like halfway transition or fully, whatever. But like, they don't have to in order to be non-binary. And the same way with trans people, not every trans person has to transition. What if they're just happy with their body? Like, there are trans people that have like trans women that have dicks because they're fine with that. Like, they're still valid. Now, to get to non-binary people are just those that don't want to fit within those two genders, I guess, the two main genders. So either they don't want to, they don't feel comfortable doing it, they feel happier somewhere in the middle, whatever it is. They want to express themselves, that's gender expression, in a way that is in the middle. But in order to be actually non-binary, they have to not just have the gender expression fit in the middle, they could actually have their gender expression be anywhere, but it's their gender identity that matters. And that's where they feel. They feel that they're in the middle somewhere. Of course, they could also be gender fluids. They feel like they are different genders, whatever the day is kind of thing. It's just, oh, today I'm a girl kind of thing. And that's fine. That works. Gender is just made up. You also have people that are agender. They don't want to fit within either of those. And then you have people that are like neutroi, or I think that's how you pronounce it. They're like right in the middle. So you have a good variety, and technically you could call each of these genders, but like it kind of just breaks it down at that point, which some people don't like. To explain this a little better, So let's think back to medieval times. In medieval times, you have like those like medieval men wearing like the dresses or like the big baggy clothes and talking in the high pitched kind of voices, and like they would present in a way that we'd call very feminine. We'd probably laugh at them and be like, huh, that's funny. And you even have like Chinese eunuchs that like would cut off. And that's like I guess a sort of way of transitioning. I'm just gonna end that train of thought. So anyways, you have them, they wanted to talk in like a really high-pitched voice, and they thought that was like the peak of masculinity, and like they thought that was very important for a person, very powerful if they did that. It's very different. It changes from culture and time, like what genders are and how to present them and what gender roles, all that. It's very subjective to the time. So what if someone nowadays is like, I feel most comfortable, feel happiest for whatever reason, they feel happiest presenting as a medieval man. So medieval masculinity is what they'll go for, kind of thing, and they'll try to present as that. It might seem like that's weird, sure, but what's wrong with that? Like, really, what's wrong with that? And technically, when they're doing that, they are not identifying or expressing as the same gender as modern masculinity, right? It's a different gender that they are, technically, but it's just like somewhat close. And so non-binary people are like that, but just to a farther extent, where it's or not even like they could just be like demi boy or whatever. So they're slightly different than the normal boy. That would probably be what you'd even call like the medieval masculinity or whatever. Like there's so much variation, and so just putting it in these two clumps and categories and saying like it has to be these is kind of silly, especially if someone's just happy or not being in one of those two. So like, what's wrong with that? Gender is just like made up. There's no objectivity to it. So like if they're happier, and the only way that it could negatively affect you really is like, oh, you feel a little guilty because you misgendered someone. Like that's about it. That's about it. There's nothing. It doesn't negatively affect you, but you misgendering them, or you actively trying to push against them having rights and them being able to transition, whatever, that is definitely negatively affecting them. So why would you ever pit yourself against them? There's literally no reason to, except for just like being stuck in a traditional mindset, and that's obviously a very regressive thing. There's no reason for that. So I find that right-wing like media stations, I guess, or like YouTube channels, whatever, they tend to push these certain like ideas about trans people that always mischaracterize them, of course. And I just wanted to point out a few of them and just quickly debunk them, just 3. 1, the left pushes that men can be pregnant, or the left pushes that men can have periods. Like, these things seem like unintuitive, right? Now, most trans men, so people that started as female are now men, if you are new to this, most trans men will not want to get pregnant. That is weird, but technically they can, because they have those parts. If they do, they might have had surgery and don't have those parts anymore, they're not able to use them anymore. Most trans men won't. And when it comes to periods, for one thing, that's not really your business. Second thing, why is that a big deal? If you have like tampons or pads or whatever in like men's bathrooms, just for those trans men, like that doesn't seem like a big, like, is it negatively affecting anyone? The only point that these are ever brought up is just to make it harder to separate sex and gender, because they're using extreme examples that are sensational and like, oh. The second thing is bathroom bills. This is generally the argument. A man can walk into a woman's bathroom saying that they're a woman and then rape someone. But have you ever thought of the case where it's like, what about the situation? A man could walk into the woman's bathroom calling themselves a man and rape someone. Like, the problem here is rape, not the fact that they're identifying as something else. Last one is trans women in sports. And I should preface, the only reason that right-wing people ever bring this up is because it's a way to, like, implicitly invalidate trans people, even though this really doesn't do anything against trans people. So the idea is that if a trans woman has gone through a male puberty before they transitioned, then they will have advantages in like sports like weightlifting and that sort of thing. So this is obviously this is a problem, I guess. Like, I don't really think people really care about this outside of them wanting to be transphobic, but we'll say it's a problem. How to deal with this? Puberty blockers. You just make it, if puberty blockers are available for people, maybe like 12 or above or whatever, if puberty blockers are available, which are scientifically, like, they work, then people don't have to go through the wrong puberty, or go through the puberty, like, they started out as a man, they don't have to do the male puberty and then transition to a woman because the law dictates that they can't have puberty blockers or whatever. That's stupid, right? That's really stupid. So puberty blockers, all they do is just stall the puberty. Once you go off of them, the puberty happens just a little later. That's it. Literally, that's it. So anyways, that's why non-binary people have to exist. It makes sense that they exist. Some people don't want to identify as one of those two, or don't feel comfortable. They have the full right to not identify as that and not express as that. And just, if you misgender them, if they want to be called they, also, sie, zim, there, whenever they have neopronouns, which are the weird pronouns that are constantly brought up, so few people. So you have 1% of people are trans. You have a very small portion of those people are non-binary. And then you have an extremely small portion of those people that don't identify, or don't use the they pronouns. A small portion that use neopronouns. And those people are blown out as if, like, this is everyone. That's stupid, right? Just forget about neopronouns. So few people use them, and if someone wants to use them, then they will ask you personally, could you use these? And then it's a thing for you. The chances of that ever happening are close to zero, so just shut up about that. This was the Birth Fed Angel.